Hiroshima, Nagasaki, the day the sky burned. Chapter 1. The Race Toward the Bomb. By the summer of 1945, the world had already been at war for 6 long years. Cities lay in ruins, empires had fallen, and millions were dead. In Europe, the Nazi regime had been crushed, but across the Pacific, Japan still fought on. The Allied forces had taken island after island, Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, at a terrible cost. Each battle was a glimpse into the kind of resistance Japan was willing to offer. The closer the Allies came to the Japanese homeland, the fiercer the fighting became. For years, American scientists, hidden in secret laboratories scattered across the United States, had been working on a weapon unlike any the world had ever seen. The project had begun in fear that Nazi Germany was building an atomic bomb first. It was called the Manhattan Project. At Los Alamos, New Mexico, physicists and engineers worked under immense secrecy, racing against time. Their leader, J. Robert Oppenheimer, oversaw the creation of a bomb powered not by conventional explosives, but by the splitting of atoms themselves. The energy locked inside matter would be unleashed in an instant, creating a fire hotter than the sun. On July 16, 1945, in the desert of New Mexico, they tested their creation. At 5:29 a.m., the desert turned to daylight. A fireball rose into the sky, followed by a shockwave that shattered windows 40 miles away. The first atomic explosion in history, the Trinity test, was a success. The age of nuclear weapons had begun. At that same moment in the Pacific, American bombers pounded Japanese cities daily. Tokyo had already been reduced to ash by firebombing raids that killed more than 100,000 people in one night. Yet, Japan refused to surrender. Its government, led by Emperor Hirohito and military hardliners, hoped to fight on until the Allies accepted a conditional peace. The United States prepared for an invasion of Japan, Operation Downfall, which was expected to result in over 1 million Allied casualties and far more Japanese deaths. Faced with that grim prospect, American leaders looked to the new weapon as a means to end the war swiftly. By the end of July, the first 2 atomic bombs were ready. They were given names, Little Boy and Fat Man. The targets were carefully chosen, cities that had escaped heavy bombing, so the effects could be clearly measured. Hiroshima, a military and industrial center, was first on the list. Nagasaki, a port city, was second. As the Allies issued their final ultimatum demanding Japan's unconditional surrender, the bombers were prepared. No answer came from Tokyo. The decision was made. The world was about to witness destruction beyond imagination. Chapter 2. Hiroshima, the morning the sky burned. It was August 6, 1945. Dawn broke over Hiroshima, a city of over 300,000 people. Children walked to school. Workers swept the streets. Women prepared breakfast while soldiers assembled in the barracks. To them, the morning felt calm, another day of endurance in a long, tiring war. At 7:09 a.m., air raid sirens sounded as a single American weather plane passed overhead. It was soon followed by 3 more aircraft. The sirens stopped. People returned to their routines. None realized that one of those planes, the Enola Gay, carried a weapon that would alter the course of human history. At 8:15 a.m., the bomb bay doors opened. Little Boy fell silently through the clear sky. It took 43 seconds to fall. Then, 600 meters above the city, it detonated. In an instant, a blinding flash engulfed Hiroshima. The center of the city vanished beneath a sphere of fire over a kilometer wide. The temperature at ground zero soared above 4,000 degrees Celsius. Human shadows were burned into walls. Roof tiles melted. The air itself turned to flame. Within seconds, tens of thousands of people were vaporized. Others, further away, were hurled through the air by the blast wave, crushed by collapsing buildings, or trapped in fires that swept through the ruins. Glass, wood, and steel were transformed into shrapnel. Rivers boiled. The mushroom cloud rose more than 10 kilometers into the sky, spreading dust, ash, and radioactive debris across miles. Those who survived the initial explosion emerged into a city that no longer existed. Streets were gone, landmarks erased, fires burned everywhere. Survivors wandered aimlessly, burned, bleeding, and blinded. Their clothes were shredded, their skin hung in ribbons. Some carried the charred bodies of loved ones. Many collapsed from exhaustion or burns, whispering for water. The heat and radiation made it impossible for rescuers to approach the center. Hospitals were destroyed. Doctors and nurses were among the dead. Water became poison as ash and debris filled the rivers. The city, once alive with movement, had turned into a silent inferno. By nightfall, Hiroshima was still burning. An estimated 70,000 people had died instantly, and tens of thousands more would die in the coming weeks from burns, infections, and radiation sickness. The survivors, later called hibakusha, faced symptoms no one had ever seen: fevers, bleeding gums, hair loss, and bodies covered with strange burns. The Japanese government, unaware of the true nature of the weapon, assumed Hiroshima had been destroyed by an enormous conventional bomb. Communications were cut, and it took hours for news to reach Tokyo. When reports finally arrived, disbelief spread. No one could understand what kind of weapon could annihilate an entire city with a single strike. The United States prepared for the next step. No response came from Japan. The war machine continued, even as Hiroshima smoldered. Chapter 3. Nagasaki, the second fire. 3 days later, on August 9, 1945, another American bomber, Boxcar, took off carrying the second atomic bomb, Fat Man. The primary target was the city of Kokura, but heavy clouds obscured it. After circling several times, the crew turned toward their secondary target, Nagasaki. At 11:02 a.m., the bomb was dropped. It fell into the Urakami Valley and detonated in the air just north of the city's center. The explosion, though slightly offset by terrain, unleashed energy equivalent to over 20,000 tons of TNT. The shockwave flattened entire districts. The heat ignited wooden houses instantly. Thousands were killed where they stood. The blast destroyed factories, churches, schools, and hospitals. The Urakami Cathedral, one of the largest Christian churches in Asia, was obliterated in seconds. Nagasaki's geography, surrounded by hills, contained some of the blast, but it also concentrated the firestorm in the valley below. The air became unbreathable, filled with smoke and dust. Survivors described the sun disappearing behind the cloud of debris. By the end of the day, around 40,000 people were dead. Another 30,000 would die in the following weeks. The pattern of destruction mirrored Hiroshima: instant incineration, fire, radiation, and silence. Across Japan, confusion and despair spread. The nation's leaders met in emergency sessions, debating surrender while fearing internal revolt from the military. Emperor Hirohito, witnessing the total devastation and the possibility of national annihilation, made the decision to end the war. On August 15, 1945, Japan announced its surrender. The voice of the emperor was broadcast to the nation for the first time, his words echoing through shattered cities and burned landscapes. The war was over. For the first time in human history, a single weapon had forced the end of a global conflict. Yet the cost of that ending could not be measured in victory or defeat. 2 cities had been erased. Over 200,000 lives, men, women, and children, had vanished in moments. Chapter 4. The Shadows That Remained. In the weeks and months that followed, the world began to understand what had truly happened. Photographs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki showed nothing but emptiness. Vast stretches of ash, twisted metal, and the outlines of where buildings once stood. Survivors walked among the ruins, their skin scarred and bodies weakened by radiation. Many of those who had seemed uninjured fell ill later. Hair fell out, wounds reopened, fevers burned. Pregnant women gave birth to children with deformities. Doctors had no understanding of radiation sickness. It was a new, invisible enemy. The aftermath was not just physical but psychological. People carried the trauma of that day for the rest of their lives. The memory of the flash, the screams, the silence after. Entire families were wiped out, leaving behind no records, no graves. The cities became symbols of loss, but also of endurance. As the world entered the post-war era, the power of the atomic bomb reshaped global politics. The United States became the sole nuclear power, at least for a few years. The Soviet Union soon followed, igniting an arms race that would define the Cold War. The weapon that ended one war threatened to start another. In Hiroshima and Nagasaki, life slowly returned. The ashes gave way to rebuilding. Trees grew again. New houses rose on the same ground where thousands had perished. Monuments were built, not to glorify war, but to remind humanity of its cost. Every year, bells toll in both cities on August 6th and August 9th. Paper lanterns float on rivers, carrying prayers for peace. The survivors, those few who still lived, spoke not of revenge, but of remembrance. They had seen what happens when science outpaces humanity. The bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki were small compared to the weapons that followed. Devices 1,000 times more powerful. Yet none have been used again. The shadow of those 2 cities still falls over every discussion of war, every threat, every test. The story of Hiroshima and Nagasaki is not only about destruction, it is about a threshold crossed. Mankind learned that it could annihilate itself, that power and morality were now bound together in a way they had never been before. In the quiet streets of Hiroshima today, the Peace Memorial Dome still stands, a skeletal remnant of the blast, preserved exactly as it was. Beneath it, the names of the dead are kept in a book, sealed under stone. It grows longer each year, as the effects of that day continue to claim lives even generations later. The world changed forever on those mornings in August 1945. The sky burned, cities vanished, and humanity saw what it was capable of. The silence that followed was not peace, it was the sound of realization. And the shadows left on the walls of Hiroshima still whisper the same warning, carried through time, that in war there are no victors, only survivors.